You are asleep, and the ground is lying to you. For a half second, your brain tries to file it under something safe. A truck passing, a large animal moving nearby, anything but the truth. Then your body overrules your brain, because your body has known for 4 seconds already. This is not that. This is the earth itself, rolling. The fire in the center of the shelter throws its light sideways as the flames slosh in their pit like water in a shaken bowl. Above you, the bone and hide frame groans, a sound with something almost like intention in it, like the structure is arguing against staying upright. Somewhere close, a child starts crying in a register that has nothing to do with hunger or a scraped knee. It's a sound built for exactly one purpose: to say something is deeply wrong, in a language every mammal in that shelter understands without translation. You have no seismograph, no emergency alert buzzing on a device in your hand, no engineer who signed off on this structure's ability to survive exactly this, no agency that will show up in 6 hours with water and blankets. What you have is roughly 4 seconds, a collapsing roof, and 20 other people who all need to be somewhere else right now. Here's the part that should stop you. Statistically, in this moment, you probably already know what to do. Not because anyone taught you in a classroom, because somebody who never met you, an ancestor you will never know the name of, survived a night like this one, thousands of years ago, and made absolutely sure the knowledge of what to do next didn't die with them. That's not folklore. That's a survival system. And by the end of this, you'll understand it well enough to wonder whether it's still running inside you right now. Here's the question everyone assumes is the interesting one. How did ancient humans survive earthquakes, floods, eruptions? That's not actually the hard question. The hard question is this: how did a species with no armor, no claws, no exceptional speed, and no ability to survive more than a few days without water manage to outlast volcanic winters that reshaped continents, while animals that were bigger, faster, and better armed than us simply vanished? The disasters weren't the real threat. The real threat was doing this with nothing. And the answer to how they pulled it off is stranger, and considerably more organized than they got lucky. Start with something that sounds almost too obvious to matter. Ancient humans could leave. A river bursting its banks is catastrophic if you've spent 3 years building a permanent structure and planting crops directly in its floodplain. It is a survivable inconvenience if your entire relationship to that land is, we live here until we don't. For a mobile group, a rising river wasn't a crisis. It was a cue. Move to higher ground. Something they were already watching for, because reading a landscape wasn't a specialist's job. It was baseline literacy, the way reading a street sign is for us. Because reading a landscape wasn't a specialist's job. It was baseline literacy, the way reading a street sign is for us. But here's where it gets more interesting than they just ran. They knew which slopes turned into landslides after heavy rain, which stretch of coast caught the full force of a storm surge, and which was sheltered, which valley funneled wind into something dangerous. None of it was written down. All of it lived in stories, place names, and the standing warnings of elders who'd witnessed things the younger members hadn't yet seen. Which raises an uncomfortable question. How far back can a story actually reach before it stops being reliable? A generation? 2? Try 7,000 years. Researchers studying Aboriginal Australian oral traditions have found descriptions of coastlines that don't match the coastline today, but do match the coastline from a period when sea levels were dramatically lower, before rising water submerged them roughly 7,000 years ago. In the Pacific Northwest, traditions describe events consistent, in geological terms, with the behaviour of the Cascadia subduction zone, a fault line scientists only formally mapped in the 20th century. Sit with that for a second. Cultures with no writing system were transmitting geologically accurate information across a span of time longer than the entire recorded history of ancient Egypt. Not flawlessly. Details shift with each retelling, the way they would in any long game of telephone. But accurately enough, specifically enough. An elder describing a flood that swallowed the coast often wasn't describing something from their own lifetime. They were relaying a warning encoded by people who died thousands of years before their listener was born. That's not myth. That's a data storage system with a longer proven shelf life than most of our hard drives. Now push the timeline back further to the event that tested whether any of this would matter at all. Roughly 74,000 years ago, the Toba supervolcano erupted in what is now Sumatra, one of the largest eruptions in the last several million years. Violent enough to trigger a volcanic winter lasting years and collapse ecosystems across huge stretches of the planet. Genetic evidence points to a severe population bottleneck around this period, with some researchers proposing our species may have dropped to just a few thousand individuals. Whether Toba directly caused that bottleneck is still debated among scientists. But the timing alone tells you something. Even we came close to the edge. And yet, we're here. Which means somewhere, in the middle of a multi-year winter with no sun and collapsing food chains, small groups of humans did not just get lucky. They deployed everything at once. Dietary flexibility, mobility, cooperation, and a knowledge base deep enough to locate food sources that hadn't collapsed when the primary ones did. That's not survival by accident. That's survival by system. The archaeological record around Italy's Campi Flegrei volcanic system tells a different story. Occupation, abandonment, timed with rising volcanic activity, then reoccupation once conditions stabilized. Not panic, monitoring. Groups tracking a volcano's behavior over time, recognizing escalating signals, and making calculated, timed decisions well before the acute danger hits. Traditional knowledge in communities with long coastal histories describes the sea receding dramatically before certain waves arrive, and animals behaving strangely before the ground even begins to shake. Here's what tends to get left out of the "here's what ancient humans did" conversation. It was terrifying, every time. The total sensory violence of an earthquake, the disorientation of a familiar landscape disappearing under floodwater, the ash-choked darkness of an eruption. It was the presence of someone who had lived through this before. Their simple, continued existence was proof. Modern disaster psychology has a name for that: a model of resilience. Ritual did similar work. Mourning ceremonies, the marking of a return to or an abandonment of a place, weren't just performances of grief. They processed collective trauma, rebuilt group identity. A child born after a catastrophic flood grew up surrounded by people who had survived it, absorbing not just what happened, but who we are because of what happened. Drought, not eruptions, not earthquakes, was almost certainly the disaster ancient humans faced most often. It doesn't announce itself, it creeps. Ancient groups maintained wide social networks, gift exchange, intermarriage, shared ceremony, with people living far outside their normal territory. In good years, that looked like unnecessary generosity, effort spent on relationships you didn't strictly need. In a crisis year, it was the entire difference between survival and collapse. A group with a wide network could cross into another territory when local resources failed, because the relationship had already earned them the welcome. It was disaster insurance, paid for over years, in trust, long before anyone needed to cash it in. So go back to that night. The ground still moving, the fire still sloshing. 20 people, 4 seconds. Except now you know what was actually in that shelter with them. It started around a fire, with someone deciding a story was too important to let die. If that kind of ancient intelligence is the part of this story you can't stop thinking about, there's a lot more of it waiting for you.